King and pawn endings are the building blocks of all other positions, and a single move can be the difference between winning, drawing, or losing a game. In this position, the kings are directly opposing each other, fighting for the key squares c6, d6, and e6. The side that has to move next loses this battle. The side that does not have to move has what is called direct opposition. Opposition is when there is an odd number of squares between the kings, and direct opposition is when the kings are directly facing each other with one square between them. Opposition is all about taking over a key square or preventing your opponent from moving to a key square. In this position, if white has to move, black has the opposition, so that after king c5, black keeps the opposition with king c7, preventing white's king from advancing. On the other hand, if it is black to move, white has the opposition. So if black's king moves to e7, white's king advances to c6, moving to a key square to help the pawn advance up the board and win the game. What happens if there is more than one square between the kings? Does opposition still matter? It does, and we are going to explore the idea of distant opposition. Let's get started. In this position, white plays king e2. In king and pawn endgames, the side with the pawn wants to get the king 2 ranks in front of the pawn. In this case, the key squares are e4, d4, and c4. If black tries to guard all 3 of these squares at once with king d5, white takes direct opposition with king d3. Black's king is forced to give up one of the key squares on the next turn, so white's king will advance 2 ranks in front of the pawn with a winning position. After king e2, black has only one way to draw this game, and that is with distant opposition. Where can black's king move to get on the same file as white's king with an odd number of squares between them? If you found king e6, great job. There is an odd number of squares between the kings, 3 squares, and it is not black's move. This means black has distant opposition. White's only way to make progress is to try and move the king forward, but once white does this, such as by playing king e3, black now takes direct opposition with king e5. White's king can't get 2 ranks in front of the pawn, so black prevents white from making progress and should draw the game. Let's take a look at another example. The main idea behind distant opposition is to turn it into direct opposition. In this position, can you see how white can gain distant opposition? That's right, with king b3. After king b6, white takes direct opposition with king b4. And if king c6, white plays king c4. After king c7, should white keep distant opposition with king e3? White can, but remember that white's goal is to get 2 ranks in front of the pawn. The key squares are 2 squares in front of the pawn, c4, and the other 2 squares to the side, b4 and d4. After king c7, white should play king c4. You might wonder why white would allow black to take direct opposition with king c6. The reason why white wants to be 2 ranks in front of the pawn is so that when black takes opposition, like in this situation, white can simply play c3. White now has the opposition, and black's king is forced to give up one of the key squares. Let's take a look at one more position together. In this position, white is down a pawn and faces a difficult defense. If white tries to quickly grab a pawn after king f3, black wins the game after king d1. Black now has diagonal opposition. After king f4, king e2, king takes f5, black captures white's pawn with king takes e3 and will advance the d-pawn to victory. If white plays king f2, black takes direct opposition with king d2. And after king f3, black plays the waiting move king e1. Notice white's king cannot take direct opposition because the pawn on e3 is in the way. If white plays king f4, then we reach the same winning position for black after king e2. If white plays king g3, black wins again after king e2. The only way to guard the pawn is with king f4. and black now takes direct opposition with king f2. White is forced to give up the pawn and enter the same losing position we looked at earlier. So what is white to do? White can save the game by gaining distant opposition. After king g1, there is an odd number of squares between the kings, and it is not white's move. This means white has distant opposition. If black plays king d2, white takes direct opposition with king f2. After king c2, white keeps the distant opposition with king g2. And after king c3, white continues to shadow the black king using distant opposition with king g3. Amazingly, black cannot make any progress. White will continue to shadow black's king until sooner or later black tries to attack white's pawn with king d3. White can now gain direct opposition with king f3. Black has one last trap after king c2. What should white play? If white plays king e2, black now wins the game because after king c3, white loses the opposition because white cannot play king e3. After king f3, king d3. If king f4, black plays king e2. And if king f2, black plays king d2, returning to positions we already studied when black has a winning endgame. After king c2, white's only move to save the game is by keeping distant opposition with the move king g2. White shadows the king using distant opposition and waits for a moment to take direct opposition. Black cannot make any progress. Now that you've learned how to both win and save positions using distant opposition, let's put your skills to the test.